feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
We're a couple of space rangers lost in the galaxy looking for a place to call home. Or we're just a couple of Andys seeing a film that will influence us for the next, 25,
30,
26, 30,
almost 30 years, I think, right?
I mean, Andy now probably has a
95
house and a mortgage and his own
Yeah,
kids.
95 to 2025 would be 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Andy's taking his kid to the reboot of Lightyear as we speak.
So this is your daddy's Lightyear then, I guess.
Sure. Today we are reviewing Angus MacLane's Lightyear, starring Chris Evans, Keke Palmer, Peter Sohn, James Brolin, Taika Waititi, and more. Eric, how you doing?
I'm good, Matt. As I was saying before we were recording, I had some family come over and we had a nice kind of sushi takeout meal. And so
Nice.
I've kind of hit this wall where it's like, I need to keep going because if I stop, I'll just literally like fall asleep. So I apologize if I'm a little lethargic in it.
No, I get you. I mean, I'm about to hop on a flight to Croatia. As you guys are listening to this, I've already landed. I'm there. I'm enjoying the Croatian sun. So I'll be on vacation.
This broadcast is from the future.
I'll be gone for a few weeks, but we will still have some stuff dropping while I'm gone, like Lightyear, Cha-Cha Real Smooth, Spiderhead. Those all might be up right now as you're listening to this, or dropping at various times, so you'll see those. Those should be a new draft of the Untitled Movie Podcast with Eric, and we also should have some interviews coming up, so keep an eye for Lightyear and other things as well. Eric, let's get into it, man. I saw it this morning. You saw it a couple days ago. We both saw it in different formats, so that should be a fun thing to talk about. You saw it in AVX, which is our kind of premium format here. That's sort of like Dolby Cinema in the US, not as good, but it's still the more premium format. I saw it in IMAX today, and what makes that special is that it's the first animated movie to open up its scope to the full 1:4:1:1 like IMAX aspect ratio that you see in a lot of IMAX film movies, like a lot of Chris Nolan stuff and things like that. So
Mission Impossible as well, right?
Yeah, like, Ghost Protocol did that, and a couple other movies. Lots of people have done it, but it's that full scope. And I'm not talking about Limax, the stuff that Marvel's doing, where it kind of opens up the scope and gives you a little bit at the top and bottom to make it more of that, 1:8. I think it's 1:9 is the other IMAX aspect ratio. This is the full scope, like almost square frame, giant IMAX screen aspect ratio.
But you were screaming because it was so intense.
It was cool, man. I can't wait to talk about it. But let's kick it off with you. You saw it a couple days ago. You've sat on it. I mean, I guess you've already kind of given people the pitch. This is the movie that Andy watched in 1995 that made him fall in love with Buzz Lightyear, and we'll get into that. But it's about the man, not the toy, everyone, and it's just about his adventures as a space ranger.
Why Chris Evans is voicing Space Ranger Buzz Lightyear and not Tim Allen,
because this is
who voices the
actor,
toy version.
Yeah, an actor in the Toy Story universe, because this is a live action movie in the Toy Story universe. So it's a movie within a movie. It is the movie that Andy saw in the 90s, which we'll talk about that because I like how they kind of go into that as well. But yeah, anyways, take it away, Eric.
Yeah, so this is something where I don't know how much I should even talk about when it comes to the plot, because going into this, I didn't really know anything about the setup of this film and where the story takes place, even, and how it's
other than what I just said.
And for the most part, I mean, it really is a single location movie, and when I mean location, it's planet movie. And the storyline, I mentioned in my social media reaction that it reminded me of this story from the 1970s, a science fiction novel called The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. And basically what that story is a guy or a group of people who kind of volunteer to join the army, because it's a Vietnam allegory, because Joe Haldeman was in Vietnam. He was an American soldier, and so he was writing from his perspective, but in a science fiction sort of context. And so with that story, characters go from Earth in 1997 to a different planet to fight an alien race, but time sort of plays a critical factor. And so every time they come back from fighting these aliens, they're, you know, like 30 years into the future.
Time
and
displacement, which we've seen in other recent sci-fi movies a lot too.
You mentioned Interstellar,
yeah.
you know, Event Horizon,
Yeah.
all the greats.
Yeah.
It just in terms of how that plays a pivotal role in the first, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes of this movie, setting up the character of Buzz Lightyear as being this kind of blowhard, good old boy who, you know, follows the mission through to the end and is a perfectionist, but to the point where he's missing out on life.
Mm-hmm. Pushes people
his
away,
own
wants
life.
to do everything by himself. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that or you hear that in Chris Evans' performance, but you see that in the animation as well. And I think obviously, you know, them hiring Chris Evans is obviously also a nod to Captain America being someone kind of out of time and trying to adapt to a world that they're unfamiliar with.
Totally,
and so with that, it's him kind of working with those that don't have the experience that Buzz has. You know, like they're not even rookies. You know, when he comes across Keke Palmer's character or Taika Waititi and sort of, you know, having to train these basically green, you know, rough around the edges sort of new recruits. And it's kind of funny seeing how, you know, these characters not only learn from one another, but like how it's a really good it's a positive message in sort of how we basically are forgiving of ourselves and others for mistakes, and mistakes don't necessarily have to be a bad thing. A mistake can actually lead to something
and be
good.
A learning experience.
Yeah, and not even a learning experience, it can actually be a positive thing.
That's a good
point. Because I feel like a part of this story, you know, is like, why would you want to go back and change things based on a mistake you made? Because if a mistake is actually something that helps people,
that's true. That's a good
to
point.
your point, also a learning experience.
Yeah.
It's not
can be both,
something that's negative.
Movie, right? Yeah.
That's
a great
the
point.
strongest aspect.
And that's the Pixar stuff in this. Because I also tweeted that I don't know if this movie necessarily has a, you know, the Pixar magic or that emotional gut punch. But what you're saying is the emotional core of the movie, which does work. I just don't think it maybe hits as hard as, you know, recent Pixar or even
up, right?
Yeah,
like
or
that's
some
like the first 10
stuff.
minutes are up.
Yeah, totally.
In a lot of ways.
Yes, absolutely. And I, not to start on a negative note, because I actually really enjoyed the hell out of this movie. And I think it is best case scenario for a movie that is, you know, a movie within a movie based on a toy, based on a Disney movie, right? And like we all made jokes about it. It's about the man, not the toy. And you kind of poked fun at this movie of just being sort of a cash grab on the Toy Story universe. But then you saw those first trailers and you're like, oh, this looks kind of cool. Like it just looks like a sci-fi adventure movie or Pixar trying to do their big blockbuster sci-fi movie. And like we've gotten their version of a superhero movie with the Incredibles, but like and we have seen them kind of expand into more creative and personal stories, like in Turning Red recently. And this doesn't feel like a cash grab at all. I do agree with you that those first, you know, that first act, that first 15 to 30 minutes of the movie, I think are excellent. I think Chris Evans as Buzz Lightyear is Buzz Lightyear Prime now. And I love the framing device of this is a movie Andy saw in 1995. And that plays throughout the movie, even with like, much like in Star Wars, where all the tech feels like it's retro futuristic because it's still 1970s tech, but they make it try and be futuristic. Like in this, I saw a lot of that 90s aesthetic and the big blocky, chunky, plasticky things from all of the space controls, all of the different things. And while the movie looks super modern, and if they had these, you know, special effects and CG back in 95 when Andy saw this movie, it would be, I can understand why it would be the greatest movie of all time to him, because the movie looks gorgeous but you still have that 90s aesthetic. And then it's just kind of like a fun sci-fi adventure movie. It's pretty straight. It is like, there is some cool elements with the time dilation and things that they bring into it, which I don't want to go too deep into because like it goes to some places that I was actually genuinely surprised it went in that first act and even in the last act. I thought the comedy hit. I really liked Socks the cat. It's cheap. It's an adorable animal robot thing that says funny stuff and does funny random things that I'm like, you know what, that's what you need in a kids movie, in a Pixar movie. And I thought Socks was great. And I just love the idea of going back to, this is the movie that Andy saw. And we talked about it offline, and you said this and you nailed it, of being like, if I was 10 years old, like how old Andy was when he saw this would be in my favorite movie. It would be incredible. And that's why I think this movie just checks all the boxes. It does exactly what it sets out to do. And I just love that idea of even some of the meta stuff of Chris Evans being Buzz Lightyear, of him being, the man, the actor, the live action person in the Toy Story universe that's playing this. And then this movie got made into one of those Saturday morning cartoons where they couldn't get the actor that played Buzz Lightyear. So they got someone else to do the voice on the cartoon, which is Tim Allen, to do the cartoon voice, which is then the toy is based off of. And I just think that that's fantastic. And then there are little nods to the Buzz Lightyear from the Toy Story universe, even in his mannerisms. And, obviously they're going to hit all the boxes as well when it comes to the things Buzz is known for in the Toy Story universe. But I feel like there was a huge attention to detail if you are a huge fan of those 4 movies and of that character. And I think it just worked really organically in this movie, and it didn't feel as cheap as it sounded when they announced it. And it ends up just being a really, really fun sci-fi family adventure movie. I compared it to Interstellar, Ad Astra a little bit. I mean, it's not obviously as quiet and introspective as Ad Astra, and it's more straightforward action. It's a family movie, but there are elements there, and just modern sci-fi, and I think, and classic sci-fi. And the IMAX footage, I'll go back to you in a sec, Eric, but like, this movie in that full scope IMAX is like, space movies are perfect for this. I went and saw Interstellar at the oh my God, Cinesphere a couple years back, and I felt like it hit, so that movie gets better each time I watch it. And the IMAX footage in that movie, this is obviously what they're, why they did something like this, of going like, hey, we could animate this in an IMAX format. Like, the quality's already there when you get the animation from Pixar, and it's not going to change when it comes to shooting on IMAX film. Like, the animation is the animation. You render it at the highest quality you can possibly show, so it doesn't matter what the aspect ratio is. But the movie so organically switches from the 239 widescreen format to that full scope IMAX. And like, it's basically any time you go into Buzz's ship, or you go out into space, or an action sequence starts, the movie kind of like, if Buzz is zipping into hyperspeed, or if some sort of thing blows up, the scope, like, it's not as jarring as like in Chris Nolan's movies, where it switches so often from dialogue to big action sequence to dialogue to big action. And I feel like in Nolan stuff, it can get a little like distracting, even though the IMAX footage looks incredible, where this does a really, really good job at switching and leaving you in that IMAX aspect ratio for a good chunk of an action sequence. And then when it goes back, it makes sense when he's either coming back into the atmosphere, into Earth, or it's a quieter scene or something like that. And there's like 40 minutes of IMAX footage. And I just say, like, if you can make it out to a real IMAX theater, and if you guys aren't like super familiar of the differences, there's like Limax, which is basically a digital IMAX theater, which is just kind of like a slightly bigger normal screen at your movie theater that they just call IMAX. And if you go see the Marvel movies there, instead of being the 239 widescreen, they'll give you kind of a full frame thing where they add a little bit of space at the top and bottom. But real IMAX are the ones that are like fucking gigantic, stories high, and they usually have IMAX laser projectors or film projectors. So you can find a list of them like on Wikipedia and stuff, and usually they're only in like major cities. Excuse me. But if you can make your way to one, I think like, and it's so worth it. Like, I think it's awesome in IMAX. And if I was a kid, or even me as a 33-year-old man, like, I was just like, holy shit, this looks great. And it was so nice to see a Pixar movie on the big screen again.
Yeah, I one scene I was thinking about while watching the AVX version, that I was thinking, oh man, this would be so much more effective in IMAX, is there's a character in this movie that is afraid of space, and a sequence where they have to cross into,
that's in IMAX.
yeah, and that scene, again, I'm being cryptic because I don't want to give away too much, but in terms of how that plays out, if you ever have a fear or phobia of like staring into the abyss and into nothingness, a lot of movies do this and kind of play with the gimmick, especially with large formats, with movies like Everest, or even 47 meters down, where you have a character either looking up or staring down and seeing just nothing, and just being completely just like a bottomless pit. And like that really works quite well when you're watching it on an IMAX screen, and I can only imagine how much more effective it was watching it that way.
Yeah, I do think it like elevated the movie a little bit, because like I really really liked the movie, but I feel like if I would have seen it on a normal screen, I feel like my rating might have gone down a little bit. Like I still think the movie's like thoroughly enjoyable, and I think a really solid sci-fi adventure family movie that I would suggest to any parent to take their young kids. Or there's nothing in here that's too scary, or it's still very much a Pixar movie. You might not have that like fucking gut punch that you want to bawl your eyes out, or you might not go, this is the most creative thing ever, but there are those nuggets in there because it's still a Pixar movie, and it's still like incredibly well made. It's beautiful to look at, and it was just so nice seeing that logo again in a theater, because we just haven't had that in 3+ years, right?
Yeah, and especially, like we both really liked, you mentioned Turning Red, but also Soul quite a bit,
Yeah.
and it kind of felt like, a bit of a disappointment not seeing those movies in the theater, because they were some of the better Pixar movies in the last 5 or 6 years. And just considering like the animation style, but also how abstract something like Soul is as well, and sort of how it plays with the visual medium and breaks it up. And
Maybe the
with
music,
it,
right?
yeah, with this, I again, like I like the movie quite a bit. I would say my biggest criticism is going into this is it being a Pixar movie, and you kind of putting a higher standard on a film that is generally good. Like if this was a DreamWorks movie, or if this was a Sony, animation film, I feel like people would probably like it even more, because the expectations, maybe now Sony is starting to kind of really build certain expectations because of Spider-Verse and the Mitchells versus the Machines. But
Yeah.
there's something with Pixar where even now that Pixar doesn't have, the perfect track record that it once had, but you still go in expecting a work of art from this animation studio working with Disney. And so when you go and see this and see a kind of fairly conventional science
Popcorn movie,
fiction
right?
popcorn movie that's great for kids, especially, that is a great introduction to science fiction for younger kids, you're going to be maybe disappointed that it doesn't really kind of have the same weight or gravitas that the Toy Story movies do, and that is going to kind of dampen the experience a little bit, especially when you're comparing it to the two. The other nitpick I have, which again is just a nitpick, but like this is kind of a retconning thing as well. Watching this movie and thinking from the point of view of a kid, like, you mentioned, like if we'd seen this as a kid, or like
Yeah.
even, VHSs that we had when we were younger, like something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Batman 89,
Sure.
where we became obsessed with those movies and watched them over and over again and wanted the action figures and all the memorabilia that came with it. The one thing that kind of doesn't work with this kind of being framed as the movie that Andy saw in 95 is that there's no toy or reference of Sock, because I feel Sock would be even a bigger deal. Socks, yeah. Socks would be an even bigger deal than Buzz Lightyear, in the same way that like when you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, everybody wanted a baby Groot action
or
figure.
Baby Yoda. I get what you're saying, because Socks will be that in this movie.
Yes.
Like I feel.
And if this was released in 95, it kind of would feel like,
and not even to gender it, but even Andy's sister would want that or something too, right? If Andy wanted the cool Space Ranger, and maybe Socks was too kiddie for him if he wanted to be pardon the pun. And then maybe Andy's sister would have wanted it or something like that too. And we're not saying like Socks couldn't have existed, because maybe Andy just he was one of those kids that wanted to be cool and is like, I don't like Socks, I like Buzz.
But who doesn't love a talking
No,
animated...
he's dope. Socks is great. There are a couple moments, and they play into the robotic nature, like the AI nature and the cat nature, like perfectly. Yeah. And I just feel like the blending of those two things is fantastic. Like and I haven't heard like an audible laughter there's a specific moment early in the movie that happens. I don't know if you know exactly what I'm talking about, Eric, but like it's a jarring thing that I wasn't expecting from Socks, and it got like an audible laughter throughout the whole theater. And I haven't experienced that in a little while because our critic screenings can be, a little bit more reserved.
Critics are dead inside and don't have any feelings.
A little bit. Yeah. So like hearing an Imax theater, which is quite large, and hearing the whole crowd kind of laugh at something, I was like, oh, that's so lovely. Like I missed that, right? Because a lot of the times it would just be Nevis and I, or me or you watching them together, or all three of us watching it together. And that was a special experience watching Soul with you guys during the award season a couple years ago. But like again, going back to it, I that moment and that Socks is just, it's so easy, right? It's just like, cute animal is gonna do funny things, he's gonna be the comic relief in the movie.
Well, even with Captain Marvel, right? Like that comparison
Goose,
with Goose,
it's
right?
exactly that, right? And it's just it's easy, but it completely works. I think Socks is hilarious, and like I don't know if all of the comedy works. Like I would say Taika Waititi's character was hit or miss for me. Like I didn't love it, and like the payoff is kind of cute and things like that with his character, but like that joke, I liked him being like a bumbling, scared kind of guy, but I just don't know if it all completely worked. Like that's the one thing I will say. Like that team, I like Keke Palmer's character, but like the other bunch of the crew, like which is Taika's character, and who's the woman who plays the older woman who plays
we just watched this, so
sorry, is it
Dale Souls?
Dale Souls, okay.
It's Darby.
So Darby and Mo, the other team members, I'm like, this doesn't always work for me. Like they're fine, they're serviceable, but I don't know if like I'm excited to see more of them if we get more from the Lightyear universe.
They're kind of like classic like Disney sidekick characters that are basically one note and are there probably to also entertain the younger kids with their antics, and kind of being bumbling kind of, but also heroic in their own ways. And I totally agree with you. Like I think Hathorn works well, especially with who she is and how she kind of has a connection to Buzz, even though it's not a direct connection. I think one of the funnier, weirder jokes in this movie that actually is kind of great. Did you
love Derek or no?
Well, I did. I mean, I kind of felt I felt like I was being attacked a little bit by that.
It's a robot,
an Eric eraser.
It's an idiot robot named, it was Eric, but he wrote a D and now he's just Derek. And it's
because at the beginning you see the Eric version kind of monitoring the situation, and then you see the Derek one. But what is interesting is, or what is funny, or a moment that I thought was genuinely kind of weird and funny for like a Disney Pixar film, is there's a moment where they're taking a break in this mining facility and they're eating a wet sandwich.
It's so
and
wet.
I thought that, like, I love the animation of that.
It's great. It's a good, like, not to give it completely away, it's just a meat sandwich, but it's very wet. And it's just like the visual is so like you can just see
even the sound.
It was fantastic. That is a very funny bit. And even the conversation that's like comes out of that is really, really funny. But the animation on that sandwich is just the ham that they got, the ham animation, whoever worked on that. Just
even the shine that was coming off
the wettest ham, dude. When Buzz puts it down on the dirty ass table and then eats it again, and they don't. It's not like I'm not ruining anything. It's not meant to be a joke or anything. It's just
joke is that it's the way that people eat sandwiches now, and that's about
different.
It.
But when they're in some like abandoned mining facility, and he just puts this wet ass sandwich down on the table,
probably really dusty,
and then like casually picks it up and eats it. I'm like, Buzz, Jesus Christ! All right, I'm like Buzz will eat anything, dude.
He's a hungry boy. Yeah, no, it like that kind of is weirdly subversive in a movie like this, and it's just something that kind of feels like you could see like in a Tim and Eric sketch and not just in like a family animated film. There is an interesting aspect as well that maybe there is some social commentary, or I'm just looking into it too much, but the idea of the base that Buzz establishes and is kind of wanting to help, basically creates this laser grid, this kind
laser shield,
of laser shield, and it almost kind of plays like a way because it's protecting this base from everything outside because
there's
the
like
hostility,
some sentient foliage that is attacking.
yeah, and you could look at that as almost like a gated community kind of thing as well. And I think that like the idea of like keeping everything from coming in, but also just like from escaping as well, and just being completely insular and inside a bubble to the point where you're just afraid to leave your comfort zone for any reason
I think
whatsoever.
that's definitely there, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's what Buzz's whole journey on. No, I mean, not necessarily. He just wants it to go back to what it was, but yeah, I can see a little bit of that. I don't know if that's even intentional, but maybe I like that interpretation. I will say I liked Emperor Zurg in this. Like I thought, like I was wondering how they would incorporate that character, and I'm very kind of surprised at where they take it, and I think it's really kind of interesting and cool. Playing on some sci-fi tropes and different things like that, but I really kind of like where that character goes. I think James Brolin does a great job there too.
I thought at first it was J.K. Simmons. When I first heard him, I was like,
too, but
is that J.K. Simmons? And then it was like, I literally stayed for the end credits to see who that was.
And usually you're pretty good at that stuff.
Yeah, and J.K. Simmons also has a very distinct voice, but they do kind of modify it for what they're using him for. But it is interesting when you think of like Toy Story 2 and the action figure version of Zurg for that, where like he has this long cape and the gun. Like I remember having one of the toys for him and thinking like, oh, like it's interesting how they sort of deconstruct the toy, or the toy deconstructed the film, whatever way you want to look at it, and then see the original versus the
how
the
it was
toy
interpreted
version,
into the cartoon, which was then interpreted into these toys, right?
which happens a lot when it comes to memorabilia and toys, where like the action figure version of a movie or cartoon series is never completely accurate. Like if you want like a museum quality version,
no, you gotta
you have to get like the
hundreds of dollars on the sideshow collectible thing. Yeah, and even like if you're a hardcore, if you love the Toy Story movies, I think there are a ton of nods there, not only to Buzz but to
well, we mentioned
Zurg.
Ham already.
Yeah, yeah, that could be. You never know. Jesus. To Zurg even, like, and even the Zurg stuff from Buzz Lightyear's relationship in the Toy Story movies. I feel like that's playing on Star Wars. It's playing on a bunch of different things, but there are nods to all of that stuff, and I think where they take it, it's even going back to where what you were talking about of like the cartoon version of a movie would maybe. If this was a movie that was that kind of middle ground where it could be for adults and kids in the Toy Story universe, because some of the themes I think are a little bit more adult, or where it takes different characters, even though it's very much a kids movie, they could dumb that down, or not dumb it down, but make it a little bit more simple in the cartoon, which is where you get some of the references to Star Wars and different things for Zurg and Buzz Lightyear, and they play on those in this movie, which I thought were interesting, and then take it into some really kind of cool areas. But yeah, then the action is great and the movie is gorgeous, man. Like I really, going back to that IMAX footage, like Eric, even if it's a movie you don't necessarily need to go see again, like if you have a chance to see it in IMAX, like it's definitely worth it. And I'm sure it'll come to Cinesphere at some point or something like that, because it is one of those movies that I feel like is in that upper echelon of like stuff you should go try to see in IMAX if you could. And I don't like, a lot of things now are just enhanced for IMAX. Like I don't love all the Marvel open scope aspect ratio. I just feel like it's kind of a marketing gimmick. Like if you go and look at those movies, they are framed for 239 because like it's just a little bit of extra space at the top of people's heads and a little bit more of their legs. And like that's kind of what the Marvel movies get you. And it fits the screen better. It goes to the like widescreen versus full screen on VHS kind of thing, right? Like or DVD. And but with stuff that has that full scope IMAX, like sure, it's not always worth it. Like you could get a Hunger Games, or even though in Hunger Games, it's still like when it happens, it's like still jarring because like those screens are fucking huge, dude. And when you first go in and you just space movies are so perfect for it because it's just like a black screen with stars and then the ship appears in the middle and it just looks awesome. But then like the whole opening sequence, so it starts in IMAX, like it's got like an IMAX prologue, which I'm surprised they didn't put with something. Like I thought that would have been, I don't know, like I guess Doctor Strange wouldn't have really made sense. I'm trying to think of what other Disney movie, but like to me, that whole opening 5 to 10 minutes is in IMAX, and I feel like you could have played that before something to show people like, hey, this is the first ever animated movie that we're doing this with, and I can't say enough good things, but I think we could go more, but it's hard to talk about this movie without going into the plot details because I feel like a lot of that was a pleasant surprise to me too. Like I knew a little bit of the plot, but to Eric's point, like I think it's best to just go in. Oh, it's a Buzz Lightyear movie, and that's where your expectations are. And then
even if you've seen that animated series that kind of spun off and was its own thing, like I don't even know if it's canon in this
the animated series
universe.
we got.
Yes.
So I interpreted that maybe that's the animated series that Andy watched, right?
Right.
And then this is the movie he watched, right?
Yeah, so the movie came first and then maybe the animated series.
Yes, that's how I interpret it. Yeah. Is that
like Batman 89 yes. and then Batman the series,
yeah,
and like
or
the
anything
90s.
Like that. Like any of those movies that came out in the 90s and 80s that got like a kids cartoon afterwards on Saturday.
Like Rambo.
Mornings. Yeah. Did Rambo get a kids cartoon?
It did. It sure did.
RoboCop as well, or like
maybe. I know they made action figures for kids, which I always find the funniest.
That's the best. Yeah.
Like in Terminator the 80s and early 90s, Aliens, it's like R-rated like franchises or IP.
Because they knew dads and moms were letting their kids watch this shit way earlier than
or even if they didn't, like the toys were still cool, right? And it's almost like the parents.
And one day you'll be allowed to see. Yeah. You give it to your kid and be like, one day you can watch this movie, but here's a cool looking alien.
Like just aside, like I remember as like I think it was like 6 or 7, my dad brought home 3 alien queens for Connor, Kyle, and I.
Queens,
the queens from Aliens, and we hadn't seen Aliens yet, but he gave us these horrific, H.R. Geiger looking creatures, and it was great. Like I love weird monsters and stuff like that, but I was looking at this and I was like, I didn't have any reference or context to it, and then like when you think back at something like that, you're like, man, that was really weird.
Dude, I remember going to, it was either Disney World or I think it was Disney World. They used to have this ride, and I don't know if it was a xenomorph or if it was based off of a xenomorph, but there was this ride. I always thought it was a xenomorph, like it was related to the Alien movies. And it's this ride where you go in, you sit in the audience, a scientist comes out, and then a tube in the middle with water in it.
Oh yeah, you showed me footage of this on YouTube.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's exactly like Aliens branded, but like I remember that scaring the shit out of me as a kid, and it always connected to the Alien movies to me, and then always made me have an interest in them, and then finally I would watch them when I got a little bit older. But I remember that ride just scaring the absolute shit out of me because basically they would pretend the glass broke and you would feel it running around the room and breathing on your neck and stuff like that. It was really, really cool. But yeah.
And this also has a couple references, especially in the opening sequence, introducing
I like
Buzz
the little
to
bugs.
Movies like Alien and Aliens and 2001 A Space Odyssey. And
totally. It's a love letter to kind of sci-fi movies and things like that. And I think it works completely as like a good sci-fi movie. And then I'm going to give the movie a 4 out of 5. I could maybe even go higher on a rewatch if it holds up. But like my only complaints really is that like I never once other than that first act, there's a really wonderful moment, like about a third of the way through the movie, that is purely Pixar that I think really works. And I'm like, oh man, I am getting choked up earlier than I expected in this movie. But then it kind of plays out as a pretty standard sci-fi movie after that. And then some of the team members I didn't love or don't think that the comedy worked. But overall, really solid family movie, really solid sci-fi movie. Go see it in IMAX if you can. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, see, I'm somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. I really liked a lot of elements of it, and I was pleasantly surprised with the story as a whole.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the plot, but like what the story was, because again, I didn't really know anything going into this other than it was a Buzz Lightyear the man, not the toy.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, the man behind the toy movie. But again, like it kind of feels like if I had seen this in IMAX,
I feel like you would be at the 4, but
4 level. And
yeah.
also I really love Turning Red. And like again, this is one of those things where like this movie, if it wasn't a Pixar film, I feel like I would be even more positive with
that's
it,
almost where I'm
thinking
at. I
about
might have
that.
given it a 4.5 if it wasn't Pixar, but part of me is
Yeah.
like, man, I wanted to cry. I wanted to be like, holy shit, this is incredibly creative or something like that. But like, it's also okay to make a good popcorn movie too, right?
Exactly.
Like,
It doesn't, not every film has to be a 10 out of 10, you know, ballpark, you know, success kind of story. Like it can also just be pure entertainment. And it kind of feels like this is Pixar kind of doing their Marvel or Star Wars movie and saying, hey, you know what, we're having fun too. And you know, this is the one movie where, you know, we're letting our hair down and just having a good time, and we hope that you do too. And we'll return to, you know, the more emotionally gripping and powerful and profound movies. I mean, they just gave us one with Turning Red, which is again, like the more I think about that movie,
it's great.
The more I love it. And again, like that's another thing that I was just kept thinking while watching Lightyear is that, man, I really wanted to see Turning Red in the theater.
I know.
But yeah, so like I think I'm gonna give it a 3.5, even though I do really like the movie, and if I do see it again, if I see it in IMAX especially, I could bump it up. But yeah, it's a much better movie than I was thinking it would be. It's like, it's not Luca, it's not
Cars,
you know, Onwards or Cars or
Yeah.
anything like that. Is it as good as the Toy Story quadrilogy? It comes close to Toy Story 4, like maybe on par there.
Very
but
different
like
movies, but yeah.
But apples and oranges. But again, like that's another thing where it's hard not to compare them because
It's all from the same studio, same same franchise, right? So if you're gonna rank the Toy Story movies, you got to put Lightyear in there now, right? Even if they are completely different. So.
And Raccacoonie, right? So
yep, I've been wanting to do a Pixar rewatch for a while, and I'm gonna do it soon. But I always start, and then something comes in the way, and I have to watch some other stupid thing we have to watch, and then I never get around to it. But I want to do it.
We should also reiterate that this is theatrical only.
Yep, no Disney
this
Plus.
Is not going to be on Disney Plus.
It will
be on Disney Plus.
It seems like 47 days is the time that Doctor Strange was in theaters to when it's coming to Disney Plus at the end of June. So
June 22nd.
If you really don't want to go to a theater, you wait 40 something days now. I really suggest that you do, and I see why Pixar was like, all right, this is going to be a return to theaters. I mean, I would have loved to see Soul and Turning Red in a theater too, but this being an action movie and, you know, popcorn movie, it made sense to be in theaters. So I'm just glad to see that Pixar's back in theaters, and I hope that, you know, I'm assuming it will alternate between Disney Plus and theaters. Like, I really don't think that this means every Pixar movie moving forward is going to be in theaters. That's just the unfortunate truth, and they want stuff for Disney Plus, and Pixar is a big probably driver of that stuff. And I feel like depending on the movie and how they feel like the box office or the content in the movie of being like, does this need to be a theater movie or can this be at Disney Plus? I still feel like they're going to alternate, but I hope everything's in theaters moving forward, even if you get a shorter window. But
do we know what the next Pixar film is?
It's a great question. I'm on the Lightyear page right now. So before we
because there's always like the one of the Easter eggs is there's always a reference to the next film.
There are, I will say, not spoiling anything, there are 3 post-credit scenes for everyone. So like, don't leave until literally the Walt Disney and Pixar logos. Don't even leave then. There's something after that. So there are 3 different post-credit scenes. I mean, you can leave. They're not but I would stay. You can stay for all 3.
Especially if like say if you take your family and your kids are really
And they
loving
don't
it and they
know,
want to
yeah.
see.
So upcoming movies, we have Elemental is the next one, which is
Right.
directed by Peter Sohn, who voiced
Who
Socks.
voices Socks.
Yeah. Which is on June 16th, 2023, and then 2 Untitled films in 2024. So only 1 Pixar movie next year, because we've been in that like 2 per year for a while, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe because of COVID and stuff. And Elemental, didn't we get like a little sneak peek at it recently?
I think we got some like first like production stills or like designs where it kind of actually, I'm starting to remember it now, where it did almost look like Soul or Inside Out.
It does look like a mix of Soul and Inside Out. You have one water dude walking with a fire woman. And yeah, so we should be getting that next year, hoping it goes to theaters and not Disney Plus. But yeah, very cool. Thank you all for listening or watching. We really, really do appreciate it. We should have some interviews up for Lightyear with all local kind of Canadian and GTA kind of alum who have worked on, they're not alum from Canada, but like, you know,
Canada's alum.
They are all Canadians that worked on Lightyear. Eric's doing those interviews, so those should be up for you guys either in the next couple days or so if you're listening to this right on embargo. But the week leading up to Lightyear's release, we should have 3 interviews up, which should be really, really cool. So check those out. We have a new draft of the Untitled Movie Podcast you guys should check out. I don't know what we're going to talk about because we haven't recorded it yet, but it should be out for you now-ish. As well as a review for Spiderhead and Cha-Cha Real Smooth should be either out now or soon. Sorry, we're recording these pretty early because I'm leaving on my trip, so I don't know exactly when things are dropping. So just
we're
check.
both ahead and also weirdly behind because like when Matt gets back, I'm sure we'll be reviewing.
Thor will probably be the first thing that we review when we get back, and then maybe catch up with some things if we feel up for it, but we'd probably be way behind at that point. Like unfortunately we won't have a review for Jurassic World Dominion.
I mean, I don't even have a review over
so
Rogers,
we can't.
So
I mean, stay tuned. Eric and I will probably tweet our thoughts about that movie. I'll see it when I'm in Croatia, and Eric will see it sometime this weekend. But just head over to Letterboxd, is Untitled_movies. All of that stuff's there. Maybe when Eric and I see Jurassic World, I'll just mesh our reviews into a Letterboxd review or something like that. But
or splice it together like a new hybrid dinosaur that wants to see the world burn like the Joker.
God damn it. Thanks everyone. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on Rogers TV /Cinema Scene, and also on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
To infinity and beyond.
They touch fingers in the movie, everyone. That's what I'm. Eric,
wet meat sandwiches.
You didn't put your finger up to the camera.
Wet meat sandwiches.
Bye, everyone.